Miracle Man Danny Jacobs and the Gorilla John Ryder are set to have their super middleweight crossroads fight this Saturday at Alexandra Palace in North London. This fight is being billed as a kind of winner stays on fight, because the loser of this fight will most likely have a very long road back to any meaningful fights and may even be better off considering retirement. And now, when you look at these two, they're, on paper, fairly evenly matched. Jacobs is 35 years old, had his pro debut in 2007, and has a record of 37-3. John Ryder, on the other hand, is 33 years old, turned pro in 2010, and has a record of 30-5. But when you look closer at their resumes, it's quite clear that Jacobs has consistently fought considerably high-level opposition. He fought Dmitry Pirog in 2010, Gennady Golovkin in 2017, Sergey Derevyanchenko in 2018, and of course Canelo Alvarez in 2019. On the other hand, John Ryder's highest level opponent is either Callum Smith or Billy Joe Saunders. Of course, we know what Billy Joe Saunders went on to achieve, but it's important to note that he fought John Ryder in 2013, which is more of a domestic level fight. But nevertheless, those are the two most notable opponents on John Ryder's resume. Ryder has some other notable opponents. These have all been domestic rivals, such as Nick Blackwell in 2015, Jack Arnfield in 2016, Rocky Fielding in 2017, and Jamie Cox in 2018. And out of these four fights, Ryder only secured one official victory. And this was his stoppage over Jamie Cox, which was on the undercard of David Haye, or Tony Bellew versus David Haye 2. And he stopped Cox very well. It was a very surprising stoppage. But I think out of that bunch, Jamie Cox is kind of on the lower end of that pile. He was a decent fighter, but I think he was massively unproven compared to the rest. So there is a clear world level experience gap in favour of Jacobs. But of late, he's kind of put in less than stellar performances. And there have been some rumours kind of behind the scenes that Danny Jacobs has had some fluctuation in dedication. Some members of his team have come out saying that, certain things like he wasn't training properly. Sometimes he'd miss training. I don't know what to make of that. They're anecdotes, but it's certainly something to consider and think about. And in his two most recent fights against Chavez Jr. and Gabe Rosado, Jacobs was seemingly just going through the motions. There wasn't much urgency in his work, and he kind of lacked the ferocity that we had seen from him previously a couple of years ago, before those fights. And I feel like this upholds the rumours of Jacobs lacking desire behind the scenes. However, with Ryder, he's managed to string together some decent form in this latter stage of his career, albeit against some limited opposition. However, he did give a good account of himself against Callum Smith, as many people believe that he was hard done by and really should have been champion after that fight. And I think regardless of whether you thought Ryder won or lost, he certainly gave Smith a tough night in front of his home fans, and seemingly took his performance to another level. But how does this fight go between Jacobs and Ryder? Well, in my head, I can see Ryder being the one to come out and advance, looking to get close to Jacobs. But I think Jacobs will look to keep some distance with his mobility. He still moves relatively well, and he's got some good straight shots. He uses the jab with some decent frequency, sometimes the right hand, especially when he wants to counter over an opponent's jab. And I feel those straight shots really what separate these two, because Jacobs, the volume and frequency of his straight shots at long range it's a lot higher than Ryder. Now, John Ryder, he does a decent job of maintaining an active guard at long range, but sometimes I just feel he takes too long. And it's partly because he doesn't always, I say bridge the gap between himself and his opponent. He doesn't always use the straight shots. He stays a fairly moving, dynamic target, but that's only half the battle. He doesn't always look to instigate and get a reaction from his opponent and get some offense off of that. So yeah, John Ryder just takes a little bit too long, whereas Jacobs, I feel like his ring IQ is a little bit higher. But also, Jacobs, I feel like his body mechanics are more refined, so his movements are a bit more athletic, though he has lacked that explosive edge recently. Despite this though, when I watch John Ryder, I noticed there's a lack of defensive responsibility, mostly at long range. When John Ryder's in the pocket and he's kind of being defensive at short and mid-range, he's a lot better. I feel like he's got some good instinct, so he's able to roll with shots quite well, take an angle after slipping, stuff like that. But at long range, he can be a little bit flustered by straight shots. You see this in the Callum Smith fight, and yeah, it's important to recognise that Callum Smith did enjoy certain size advantages over John Ryder. But John Ryder, sometimes he gets stuck a little bit. He might get caught with one jab, and he'll just return to the position he was just in where he got hit by that jab, rather than moving off and taking an angle and just exiting that engagement. Sometimes he gets caught in place where he'll get caught with a jab and move off, but then move back in and get caught with another one. It's a little bit strange, because a fighter of his experience, you'd expect him to learn how to just go into another position of safety, you know. And I've noticed that John Ryder, he's quite inconsistent with his counters, which is strange because, as I say, at mid range he's actually pretty decent defensively. So it's just a bit odd. And his body mechanics are kind of strange because he has this very strong muscular physique. You know, he's nicknamed the Gorilla for a reason. It's a very appropriate nickname. But he doesn't necessarily have the power. Not to say that you can always judge power on appearance, but John Ryder strikes me as someone who should punch much harder than he actually does. And I feel like there's just a bit of disconnect in his movements and his biomechanics. Often he'll throw very tight hooks and body shots and uppercuts, but a lot of the time they're arm shots. If you see, he doesn't fully articulate his body into them. So there is plenty of stuff for Ryder to work on, but it is the latter stage of his career. So yeah, that's my main concern though, is these instances where Ryder becomes flustered by particularly jabs, and he doesn't do a great job of defending his current position that he's in or moving to a safer one. Jacobs, however, and even though he's lacked this ferocity and this kind of fire that we've seen from him previously, he is very wily and a lot more mindful of his defense these days. And I feel like these may be contributing factors to his unexciting performances. But if you look in his previous fights, and I know these are very different styles to John Ryder, but against Chavez Jr. and Gabe Rosado, see that even though his offense is a bit limited, Jacobs is, he's very defensively responsible. He'll often back out of an engagement at an angle, and on top of that, he'll have, the kind of chin tucked behind the shoulder alongside his right glove on the left side of his face, really looking to minimize the opportunities and the shots that his opponents might go for. He often makes use of a kind of straight arm control as well if an opponent misses a shot. So defensively, Danny Jacobs, he's no wizard, but he's not a slouch. And I think his style seems to favour defence these days. I think when you look at this fight, many people are pointing it out, it's quite clear that Ryder will have his best success up close on the inside, like in the Smith fight. And yeah, Danny Jacobs doesn't enjoy the same size advantage as Callum Smith. However, Jacobs is a better mover than Smith and is also a smaller and slicker target, which I think will prove quite difficult, or more difficult, for John Ryder in this fight. And because of this, John Ryder's success, I can see it being few and far between, even though I think it will be eye-catching. I think when he lets his kind of short hooks go and maybe some body shots and uppercuts, I do believe it's going to catch the eyes of the judges and the crowd. But I believe that this fight does go to points because of the defensive responsibility of Jacobs. I believe if someone's going to get stopped, it probably would be Ryder, because he's been stopped. Because When Jacobs has been stopped before, but that was against Pirog, who, if you look at the ability level of those two in that fight, Pirog was several levels above Jacob at that time. Jacobs was quite green, whereas Pirog was kind of unknown, and he was an unknown quantity, and he turned out to be an amazing fighter. Very sad that his career got cut short. And he basically flattened Jacobs with one punch. It was a very well set up punch, and Jacobs, as I say, was green. But Jacobs is a lot more. He's got a lot of guile these days, and he still carries a bit of power, I think, even though his tenacity maybe is waned a little bit over the past couple of years. So I do think this fight goes to points, goes the distance, and I don't say this with much confidence, but I can see Jacobs winning a close split decision. And now I see this as being a close decision, obviously on the cards, but also in terms of people's perception, where I think some people are going to really like the consistent but conservative long-range offense of Jacobs, paired with his obviously kind of slickness in defense. But then other people are going to prefer the less frequent but more eye-catching inside fighting of Ryder. So yeah, I think I'm going to nail my colours to the mast and say I think Danny Jacobs wins a close split decision, but one where once again people think that Ryder is probably hard done by. So that's just my opinion on this fight. Feel free to agree and disagree. I feel like this fight's kind of been forgotten a little bit because, of course, last weekend there was Chris Eubank Jr. versus Liam Williams. Excuse me. Then there's this fight, and then next weekend there's Kell Brook versus Amir Khan. So it's kind of sandwiched in between these much bigger, higher profile fights. It's kind of been forgotten about. But, you know, I don't feel like it's been promoted all that well because Danny Jacobs, as far as I know, he's never fought in this country as a pro before. So his profile is pretty small. John Ryder, yeah, he's a Londoner fighting in London, but he's not really a hometown hero or anything. So yeah, it's a bit of a weird one, and a lot of people are predicting that it's not even going to be the most entertaining fight, and I tend to agree with them. I don't think this is going to be a great fight. Some people have said the undercard's going to be good because there are loads of prospects. I've seen the undercard, and in my opinion, it looks like... Do you remember when Matchroom used to have those next-gen shows that were like sponsored by JD Sports? It looks like a next-gen show. It doesn't look particularly good at all. Maybe Felix Cash's fight will be okay, but I don't know his opponent. But I don't want to sound like a downer. Hopefully it is a good night of boxing with a good main event. I just wouldn't bet any money on it. But that's just my opinion. Let me know what you think in the comment section below. Leave it all there. And I'll get back to you. If you can like, comment, share and subscribe, all that good stuff, be greatly appreciated. Thanks for listening, and I'll catch you on the next video.